Section 3. You will hear a conversation between a flight crew and other people, including a supervisor. They are discussing an incident. Write your answers in your test booklet. You will hear the recording twice. The first time you listen, the conversation will pause at intervals to allow you to answer one or two questions about what you have just heard. After each pause, you will hear a beep before the conversation continues. The second time you listen, the conversation will continue without any pauses. This section is worth 10 marks.
Cliff and Susan, good morning to you both. Please come in and take a seat.
Thank you, Andrew.
Good morning, Andrew.
I'm sure you know why I've called you in this morning.
Well, I guess it's to discuss the incident near Fisherville yesterday afternoon.
That's right, your near miss on Pacific Flight 297. But please understand that it's just a routine, informal debrief. And the reason we cancelled your sectors today was just so we could discuss what happened as soon as possible.
Okay.
Now let's look at what happened on your third sector yesterday, from Nelson into Fisherville. Cliff, can you please take me through it?
Sure. Apart from that incident, the rest of the flight was routine, although we pushed back 7 minutes late at Nelson.
And why was that?
We had to offload some luggage after 2 passengers failed to show up.
Do you feel this put you under any pressure, Cliff?
Oh, it may have a little. We had a forecast headwind of about 80 knots, so it would have been hard for us to get to Fisherville by our scheduled arrival time.
Okay, fine. Sorry, just for the record, who was pilot flying and who was pilot not flying?
Cliff was in command and I was pilot not flying.
Thanks. Go on, Cliff.
Our departure, cruise and top of descent were all without incident. ATC advised us of traffic, a Cessna 210, outside controlled airspace, inbound to North Rocks, about 10 miles past Fisherville, out to the northwest.
Yeah, I'm familiar with the area.
That aircraft was at 8,000. We overflew it about 40 miles out, so it was certainly no problem. There was no other traffic, was there, Susan? None that ATC advised us of anyway.
No, there was nothing else. In fact, it was fairly quiet on centre frequency.
You now have time to answer questions 1 and 2.
We transferred to the local area frequency at about 20 DME and made our initial inbound call.
Just so I can visualise the timeline on this, do you recall your estimate for Fisherville or for the circuit area and how high you were when you made the first call on the local area frequency?
Susan?
Yes, we were estimating the circuit at time 36. That'd be 1136 UTC, and from memory I think we may have been approaching 6,000. That's in line with company policy.
Thanks, Susan. Now, were there any responses to your call, Susan?
Only one. There was a Cessna 172 who reported on final for 19 for a full stop.
I see. Okay, go on please, Cliff.
Well, we slowed quite a lot at about 10 DME and took the first stage of flap. Susan sighted the field at 12 o'clock. The forecast wind was an 8-knot southerly, and this was also supported by the Cessna on runway 19. I broke right, anticipating joining a left circuit for 19er, but I stayed a little high until we could confirm the wind direction indicated by the windsock. And Susan also then made a circuit joining call.
Susan, did you specifically say a left circuit for runway 19?
Yep. I advised we were going to be joining early downwind for 19. About a minute after the call, we were approaching the upwind end of the field, and Cliff confirmed that the windsock was indicating about a 10 to 12 knot southerly, and also that the Cessna was clear of the runway and taxiing onto the main apron.
And then suddenly, about mid-downwind, I spotted a low-wing light aircraft at our 10 o'clock, descending into us, no more than about 300 feet above.
Can you recall about how far from you he was when you first sighted him? Laterally, that is.
Oh, maybe 1,500 metres? I don't think it was any more than that. Wouldn't you agree, Susan?
You now have time to answer questions 3 and 4.
Well, I didn't see it quite as quickly as you did, Cliff, but yes, I'd say 1,500 metres would be a pretty good estimate. It looked like a Piper Lance.
Didn't you get a TCAS alert?
We received no TAs or RAs whatsoever. I think this pilot was probably VFR and may not even have been equipped with a transponder.
Right, I see.
Anyhow, I descended rather abruptly, whilst also turning right, probably about a 30-degree bank angle.
You now have time to answer questions 5 and 6.
Was there any avoiding action taken by the Piper?
I don't believe so, although he may have levelled off because, to be honest, I'm surprised that we didn't collide. Susan wasn't able to see the aircraft on her side after we'd passed. She did make a couple of further radio calls, though, to try and make contact with him, but there was no response at all.
I guess by then you felt pretty shaken up.
Yeah, we did. So then we lowered the gear and took further flap, and we continued with a normal approach and landing, except that it was a much longer downwind than usual.
And why was that?
Well, we needed to refocus on managing the aircraft, and also allow time to complete our approach checklist, just so that we were both calm and collected enough to be able to make a safe approach and landing. And our landing was without further incident.
How were you feeling immediately afterwards, Susan? Still on downwind?
Oh, a bit shocked by what had just happened, but still able to perform as required.
You now have time to answer questions 7 and 8.
Good. So after your landing, did the aircraft in question show up at all at Fisherville?
Negative. We didn't see it again.
Did you have much time on the ground then?
Yes. Well, fortunately we had a 90-minute turnaround yesterday, so I actually went and had a chat with the chief flying instructor at the flying school. They're the owners of the Cessna 172 that had landed prior to our arrival.
Oh, okay, that was a good idea. And what did they say?
Well, that was interesting. Phil there thought that it was probably a Piper Lance. There's one that he'd seen fly overhead once a week, normally much higher than circuit altitude though.
Thanks for following that up, Cliff. I'll include that in the company report, and it certainly doesn't sound like there'll be any repercussions on you. You did everything by the book. Is there anything you would have done differently?
Well, I should probably have made an informed decision to use runway 19 when we were still 10 miles out, and then have descended to circuit height earlier. That would have put us lower and given us greater clearance from the Piper.
Do either of you have anything more to add? Susan?
No, that's pretty much covered everything, Andrew.
Thanks, Susan. Cliff, anything more to add?
Just one thing, Andrew. To help prevent a recurrence of this kind of incident, I'd like to suggest that transponders be used outside controlled airspace, so that we're aware of any light aircraft operating in our vicinity. It may even just be a matter of further pilot education to stress the importance of switching them on if the equipment is fitted.
Okay. Well, thanks, Cliff. Thanks, Susan. I'm grateful to you for coming in so early this morning to discuss this. You can expect your regular schedules to be resumed tomorrow as per your original roster.
Thanks, Andrew. It's no problem.
Thanks, Andrew.
You now have time to answer questions 9 and 10.